In this episode of A Day in the Water, I catch up with Gold Coast Sports Fishing Club President Bruce Andersen and his son Nathan, both hard-working community members who run the annual Flathead Classic. We spend a day in the water chasing a few flathead, but specifically I want to teach the guys a little more about targeting bream in the deep during the winter. We chat to Nathan about his fishing adventures over the years. Hey Nathan, welcome to A Day in the Water. How you going, mate?
Good to see you, Craig.
Obviously, you know the format of this this show.
Big
Fan, my only fan. So I'll start back around your. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on the Gold Coast.
Yep.
You know, we moved to Port Macquarie when I was 13 or so, and that's where we really got into the fishing with lures.
Yep.
We didn't do too much with lures on the Gold Coast, but once we moved down there, we had beautiful, clean river system. Not as much boat traffic as the Gold Coast, and there was a lot of people down there that we were able to learn from and really pick up the lure fishing.
So tell us about your earliest fishing memory. When was it you went, this is actually pretty good?
My earliest fishing memory would be going down to stay at a family friend's house in Woolgoolga, and we'd fish at Red Rocks, just fishing off the beach, and you know, with the alvy and the surf pole, and I might have been 3 or 4 at the time, constantly winding the bait in and annoying Dad. And my earliest memory with lures would be going camping at South Stradbroke Island and just having some of the first squidgies that come out and tying them on an 8-foot boat rod and having no idea what we were doing and walking up and down the beach. And I still remember the first flathead that I got on a soft plastic. It was on a Gary Glitter squidgy. And it from that day, you know, you just get hooked.
And I think you're right there. I think there's times when we fish and there's a moment when it becomes in our blood really, and we get that passion for it. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah, definitely. I think I was lucky to grow up with, you know, with my father being in VMR, Volunteer Marine Rescue. I grew up around the water, and I was lucky enough to meet a lot of really good fishermen through that inspired me to really try to take it seriously. And I think it's like that old thing of you only get out of something what you put back into it. And I found the more time we put into fishing, the more rewarding it would become.
Yep. And moving forward, you're back on the Goldie now, and obviously heavily involved with the Gold Coast Sports Fishing Club. Tell us around how did you guys become involved, and how that's sort of played out for you?
Yeah, there was one of our family friends, Paul Nilsson, who was involved with the club for maybe 20 years or so, and we ran into him one day. I was 15 at the time, so you're talking over 10 years ago now, and we ran into him one day and we were mentioning that we were starting to get into catching bream on lures. And he mentioned that there was the Easter Bream Classic that the club was holding at the time, and we went along. I think it was 2008, and we fished in the Easter Bream there and met a bunch of the club members, and then we fished our first classic, and as a family, like, we've been members ever since. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bruce obviously on his second tenure as president, and you've been on the committee now for a couple of years, helping out in that social media and just general space. So yeah,
it's something we're very passionate about, the club. It's been hard the last few years with what's been going on in the world, and I think that the club's on the up and up, and it's exciting to be a part of it. And the club's very prestigious. It holds one of, if not the greatest tournament in Australia, I believe, and it's an honour every year to be a part of the team that holds it. It's very, very rewarding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly one of the main reasons why we have such a passion for flathead fishing specifically.
So we've spoken a little bit about your history and how you got into fishing and that kind of thing. Now, today we've got your dad, Bruce, here. Now, this is a really hard question, and I want you to be honest. Who's the greatest influence on your fishing?
The greatest influence on my fishing is definitely Dad. It has to be. He's absolutely been the one there for most of my PBs and greatest memories with fishing. I think growing up in the tournament space, it was, when I was a kid, it was looking up to even someone like Tom Ryan in the sport fishing club. I was lucky enough to fish with him when I was a kid and when we were growing up.
So where do you think that point, the transition came in, where you sort of went from, I guess, social angling and started angling and sort of started getting into the more competitive side and that kind of thing?
I think the competitive side was just from joining the club, you know, from trying to catch the monthly species each month. And we're talking over 10 years ago when it was maybe not quite as competitive as it is today. But like I remember the transition into using lures every time and not buying bait, that started sort of right around when we joined the club in 2008. And at the time we were going camping as often as we could, specifically South Stradbroke, sometimes up at the pin, and there was a couple of guys that my old man knew through VMR, and they had little hornets and little tinnies, and they were really getting into using braid, using fluorocarbon, using light jig heads, little plastics, and they really sort of showed us the way when we began fishing with lures. And then through camping with them and through joining the club, just starting fishing the classic and realizing that you really can take it seriously if you decide to, and there is an opportunity to be competitive and have it be a competitive hobby. That's sort of where it began, and we haven't really looked back.
Everyone's favourite question: do you reel left-handed or right-handed?
Real right-handed, yeah. I was taught as a kid to go to wind with my left hand, and I just could never pick it up.
So what's your favourite style of fishing?
I mean, if I could only target flathead one way, at the moment it would definitely be on the big lures. We haven't had quite the success as some other people have, but we've had some success with the big stick baits and also the swim baits, and they are so much fun.
Now you and Bruce were very fortunate a couple of years ago to fish with Stephen Ward. You bid on Steve in the Top Gun Flathead shootout. Tell us about that, because he's a big bait specialist.
Yeah, we learnt a lot that day. Steve ended up getting the biggest fish that day. I think it was an 88 from memory, and that was on a big Wilson affinity. It was Xerec affinity. Yeah, I mean, it was he had just won the individual of the Flathead Classic the prior year, and it was special. Yeah, definitely.
Now he's very proud to tell everyone that he was the classic champion for 2 years because of COVID. So
he's still the reigning champion technically.
What's your favourite fishing memory?
I don't think I'd have just one memory. I mean, there's a few obviously that stick out. You know, the PB Flathead and fishing down at the Hastings River. But my favourite fishing memories all revolve around the classic and just being around the camaraderie, like being around mates. Some of them you only see once a year, and I've got so many memories, I'm sure we all do, of the nights of the classic and during the day seeing people out on the water. And yeah, definitely.
There's one other really important thing that happens at the classic. The morning of the registration, Christian Polverini puts up the dance.
Yeah, the dance video.
The dance video, which is kind of like an unofficial launch of the classic, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure he's already got a dancing crowd ready for this year.
What's your favourite place to fish?
That one's easy. It'd be the Elliott River, just south of Bundaberg. Yep.
All right. You now have unlimited funds. Where are we going? What's your ultimate fishing destination?
Florida in the USA, easily. Yeah, you can catch anything freshwater right out to blue water fishing. One of the big tarpon on fly. One day I'll definitely get there.
So on the Goldie, we're going to target flatties. One lure. What are you going to tie on?
I'm putting on a white lure, obviously depending on the watercolor, but I always start with white if I can. And it's going to be a 3.5 inch Eco Gear bolt, yeah, on a football head. Yep.
And you're going to fish it on what kind of outfit?
I use the Blade and Tails Wilson. It's a 3 to 6 kilo. It's 7 foot, I believe, and the same sort of reels. That 10-pound line, 2500 size spinning reel.
What's your PB flatty?
89.
89.
Yep.
One off the 90. How close?
Yeah, and that was over 10 years ago now. So I've got a few in the 80s, but I want to get into the 90s. Yeah.
Was that caught on the Goldie or somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was on up at the pin.
Up at the pin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shallow or deep?
Sort of in between.
Is that okay?
Yeah. It was on the corner of Crusoe, the tip of Crusoe.
Okay.
Yep.
So today, run us through. We've been doing some bream fishing today. We did a little bit of flathead fishing when that tide was a bit lower. And so run us through the gear you're running today.
So today I've just got a Samaki Zing Extreme rod. This is quite long. This is my Bream rod that I use quite commonly. It's 7'6", 2 to 6 pound. I like the really long rod, even with plastics myself. It's quite fast actioned, but it's still quite a long rod. I've got a 2500 sustain, and that one's got 8 pound sunline on there. And we got 6 pound FC rock, and just a little 1/12 jig head.
Yep, with a little Z-Man grub tied on there, which is which was doing quite well if you're late in the session too. So nice little outfit, mate. So today we've been buzzing around in the Skeeter. Tell us about the Skeeter.
It's
a beautiful platform to fish out of.
I don't really know what to say. It's something I don't take for granted. I remember when this boat was imported by a friend of ours, and it's a Skeeter WX 1790T. It's got a 100 horsepower Honda tiller steer,
which in itself is quite unique. I know most of the bass boats and that you see around the place have hot foots and that kind of thing. Tiller steer, very unusual.
Yeah, it's the way this boat was designed in the States. They call them a walleye boat or a back troller, and there's a little compartment down at the transom there where they'd put the sounder over on the port side, and you'd troll facing the rear of the boat, and that's why it's got a very open transom, and it's designed for trolling in big lakes. So it's absolutely perfect as a crossover boat where we live in southeast Queensland. We've had it out a little bit further out than Spot X, and we've had it up little creeks, and it's genuinely, like I said, I don't take for granted how fortunate we are to have this boat.